Oh, there's no fade out there. Whoops. All right, welcome to the Big Story Podcast. Today we have an awesome guest. Andy Bennett is joining just me. Really excited to have Andy here. Andy, hey, welcome.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. We were lamenting our diminishing eyesight as time is robbing it from us. You said you think art school was the first thing that nailed you?
I had great eyesight until sometime during my time in art school. I started noticing my problems. You know, as you're looking across the room at a model, and then you get down here and you're drawing right next to your face, and then you look back up and you can't see anything. And so that was the beginning of the end.
I remember distinctly, I think it was like 1994. I was in my apartment in Manhattan, and I was working on some, comic book project at the time. And I was just like, I think I just recognized, I'm like, why am I getting headaches? Like I'm getting headaches. And it was like one of these things where I was really proud of having really good eyesight. And I thought like, oh no, I'm losing my eyesight. It was this huge sort of like, existential, thing for a 20 whatever year old. And so I went to the eye doctor, which is so unlike me, because typically I'm just like, whatever, I'll just suck it up. But like, for some reason, this one drove me down there, and the guy did all the tests, and he's like, no, your eyesight's fine. He's like, what you're doing is you're just straining your eyes because you're staring all day long, at this thing that's only a foot in front of your face. And sometimes you're like 2 inches away because you're stupid. And he's like, just, you know what, every 50 minutes, like just stop and look across the room for a couple of minutes, look out the window, and then go. And like, I did that and everything was fine. But like, it was one of those things. But this whole sort of looking at computer screens is like, I think there's just no hope. It's just digging its electrons into our brains and just burning our eyes out.
Absolutely.
And that a lovely thought. So let's go back. Where'd you grow up?
Southern Ohio. I've been in Ohio my whole life. Grew up in a little town outside of Portsmouth, Ohio, which is right down on the Ohio River. Yeah. Right at the very bottom of the state. And, grew up there and moved to Columbus for art school. And here I've been ever since.
Wow. And there you remain.
Yeah.
That's cool. We did I guess maybe it was like the first year of the I think it was like pandemic year 1. We went to Southern Ohio for like a vacation. My wife is like, I want to go here and I want to go check out all the Indian, these, because there's all these amazing like old Indian cities over, in that area. So we stayed at this really interesting, I don't know, it wasn't an Airbnb, but something similar, but it was all these like little cabins, but they were like handmade cabins. And they had a Viking longhouse like on the main section, and then there were all these sort of out cabins. And it was nutty and very fun, but then we got to throw an axe all afternoon, so that's cool.
Nice.
And then but yeah, we just visited those places, and oh my God, they're incredible. These locations, they're just, I mean, they're cities. I mean, there's that giant snake thing that,
the Serpent Mound. Yeah.
Serpent Mound. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And the people who live there, who grew up there, just absolutely take all that stuff for granted. That's just, it's just, there it is,
Yeah.
It's not unique to them.
No. And because we like, but I think that's with everyone. Yeah. It's, I grew up in New England, and when I took my wife home to show her where I grew up, she's like, you grew up in this, because to her, it's like a picture book. And to me, I'm like, oh, it's just that place that I wanted to get away from. So,
right.
Yeah. So no offense. It's actually lovely. And I, Godspeed to all live there. Thank you. So that's cool. So Columbus but it's like, it's really like Southern Ohio is beautiful, like rolling hills,
Appalachia, yeah.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So, like I'm on the other side of Appalachia, so because up in Asheville, so we're sort of like, just kind of right over in South.
Right.
Like, was that was it did the area kind of inspire you growing up, or was that like part of like?
No, not really at all. It's honestly a very backward place.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a miracle that I ended up in any kind of creative field coming out of that background. But I had really supportive parents who totally got behind me. They didn't understand it, but they were all for it.
Yeah.
So I gotta appreciate what they allowed me to do.
Totally.
And, I had good teacher in high school, art teacher in high school, who was also very encouraging, and so that I really credit those guys with, getting me out of there.
Yeah, showing you the way.
Sure.
There's the door. Go.
Right.
Yeah. Well, but that's pretty amazing that like you like, so, I mean, are you an only kid, or did you have siblings? Were there?
I have 3 siblings. I'm from a family of 6, so
that's no joke.
Yeah, no, it was a really traditional Southern Ohio nuclear family situation.
Wow. So and how, like, so I mean, if you're like, so like obviously they were very supportive of that, but like it's easy to kind of get lost in the mix of that of a large family. Like I have a lot of older siblings, so
I'm the oldest of the 4. So.
Oh wow, okay, so that's an interesting dynamic right there. Yeah. So that's interesting. So like, I mean, you were the one, like, so they had to be kind of like keenly sensitive to you because you were the first there in the scene. So you kind of set the tone.
Yeah.
And so like they were on that, and really, wonderful for them saying, hey, we're not going to go like, no, you need to go play baseball or whatever the thing is that you didn't want to do.
Right.
So were you like a sensitive kid, like drawing and like making things, or what was the?
Yeah, they tell me, as a toddler, I was always asking them to draw things for me. And then eventually, I started doing it myself. And my dad worked as an insurance salesman, and he would bring home just reams and reams of paper because they would just dispose of paperwork.
Right.
And so I always had plenty of stacks of paper to do my drawings on, and they always provided that and encouraged that.
That is, wow, that you just kind of maybe kind of flash on that, like, because that was a big thing for me as a young kid, is that my parents would always bring what I considered like, these magical art supplies, which were just office supplies, home with them. Yeah. And they're like, here you go, here's this or that. And if stacks of cardboard or whatever the dumb thing was. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best. And I would,
for sure.
Yeah. Like, but it was like, so like, I think, maybe that's a kind of a common thread, maybe like, it's an easy solution for a parent to go, hey, like my kid is inveterately using things up, so we need to get supplies, and here's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. And then you said you went to, so like, I mean, did your art, like, was this a known quantity? Like I was talking with Wilfredo Torres, and he was like, he was talking about being the kid, like everybody kind of knew he was the kid who could draw. So growing up, so like that was always like, that's who you were and that's what you did. If
that was kind of my high school hook. Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay. And were you comfortable like with that sort of that being the art guy for people?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
That became, my identity. Everybody's struggling for identity in high school, sure. So that was an easy one to latch on to.
And what were the things like growing up and up into high school that kind of like, I have this theory about the age of 12, like by the time you hit 12, you're kind of locked into the things that are going to be the things that are going to make you excited to one degree or another going on. So did you have like favorite stuff, like were like, I don't know, using He-Man as an example, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I was a comic book kid. I think probably about fourth grade or so, I started, the comics collecting habit that is the downfall of all of us. But yeah, and I had some buddies who were also into the same kind of thing, and we liked what we liked. So I was a big early fan of comics in general, but I never really thought about doing it for a living. It was never really a thing that seemed like a viable career for me. So I'm like,
right.
As like, in grade school, I'm trying to think of what, kind of thing I want to do. So I'm thinking, oh, should I be an architect? Should I be a fashion designer? What kind of careers can you do with this thing? And so, it never really, and I still don't, do it as a career. It's still something that I do because I enjoy it. And,
yeah. It's well, I mean, it's amazing how many comic books are produced and created as a side hustle. Like the volume of comic works, and because we can use covers or prints and whatever in that category, and it's this amazing thing where I think we're in this age where we can self-produce so much that it becomes that cottage industry that other things have traditionally been cottage industries. So you don't have to make soap, you can make comic books. So it's a deal. But that's cool. What books kind of blew your, do you remember kind of blowing your mind and exciting you? Or stories?
The first comic I can ever remember owning, just that my mom bought me off the newsstand, was a copy of Marvel Super Action, which is a reprint series.
Yep.
And it was reprinting a Steranko Captain America.
Okay.
And there were only just a couple of those, but man, really, really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing things. And, my mind at that time really could not handle the scope of it.
Sure.
It was really impressive. And so that sort of, was the spark that lit it all off,
Yeah.
I was a big fan of Frank Miller's Daredevil series.
Okay. Yeah.
I started reading that right after they killed off Elektra.
Okay.
So I didn't get in on the whole initial Elektra thing, but I was reading the Miller stuff after that and just loving every minute of it. Love Frank's. I never really studied the whole, phenomenon of creating comics and of storytelling and stuff. So I didn't really have any words to describe why that stuff worked for me, but it worked.
Yeah.
And so that really kind of established how I think about making comics, about storytelling, without me even knowing it. I was also a big fan of Byrne's Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
And eventually I discovered Arthur Adams and got way into everybody likes Arthur Adams, right?
Yeah, I was sophomore or junior in high school when art hit the market, and I remember, I think Long Shot came out like sophomore or junior year of high school, and it was this just I couldn't believe it, because for me, I love superheroes. I was like, oh, I love superheroes. That was all my favorite stuff. But the comic books that stood out for me and once again, I was there for the whole Daredevil thing. I was, the Thor thing, the X-Men with Byrne. And, so I read all that stuff as it happened and I loved it to death. But I was always hooked on the Micronauts from the first run of the Micronauts. And I kept buying the Micronauts all the way through all the bad years, and they were still exciting and fun to me. But what I was doing is I was just hoping for a little bit of the magic from those first 12 to 15 issues or whatever it was.
Yeah, get that Michael Golden stuff back here.
Yeah, and it was this thing. And then, you know, Arthur came on the scene with Anne's story, and I'm like, this isn't straight up comic books. It's another, like, it's an adventure. And because neither one of them were like taking a thing that you already knew and just telling a new story with that. They were like, hey, here's a whole new thing that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
And it was so like, what? How? And so when Longshot hit, it was this great thing. And then of course, then Marvel gave Arthur all the, access to the Legos, and then he does all the X-Men and, all that, those amazing annuals. And
the annual 10 was the one that really just blew me away with the big Mojo X Babies thing. And
sure.
I was floored by that one.
Yeah. No, it was really some unbelievable stuff, and that Asgard crossover stuff that, it was a fun time for sure.
It was good times for comics. Yes.
Yeah. So okay, that's cool. I mean, it's cool to see that, like, and it's funny because, like, so I got hip to you because of Jamie Jones, who I was hanging out with him. Jamie's been on the podcast a few times, more than a few times, and he, so Jamie's just, loves, artwork, and so he's like, oh, you got to see the stuff I got, and then he goes, check this out, and he holds up something, a piece of yours. And I'm like, holy crap, like, who is this? And like, so he told me where you were, and like, I made a beeline over to you, and I'm like, you need to come on the show. And you're like, I do. And so you were very polite to not, hit me with something and tell me to run away.
Oh man, that's super nice of you. Yeah, I had never, that's the first time I had met Jamie, and he's an outrageously talented guy too. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's just a great, he's sort of like it's good to have those kind of personalities in the comic industry, like these very comfortable and, affable individuals all around. So
absolutely.
So cool. So I mean, I'm getting getting a picture of your jam. Now, like, were you like, I did not sit and like make a lot of my own comic books. I did a few, maybe like near the end of high school. Because the concept of kind of like writing it and drawing it and putting the words down was all very, big. Did you do that kind of stuff, or did you just kind of like do your own drawings and just draw stuff?
I did a lot. I didn't really write much of anything. I've never really written much of anything. Yeah. I did a lot of drawings all through high school. I did a lot of drawings, and I did all my, my Marvel submissions that I wanted to send in and all that stuff. And, and just starting out at art school, I was still doing that stuff. And, I just started to realize that it just didn't fit the way that I work.
Okay.
And it's just not something I was cut out for, I don't think. So, and that was about the time I discovered Arkham Asylum.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the paradigm shift for me.
Yeah.
I think in kind of getting that synergy between comics and art.
Yeah.
Because you had, you had all your Arthur Adams stuff, and that was fine. That was all good and fine. And I still enjoy that stuff. But then when you see Arkham Asylum, you see what Dave McKean is cranking out.
Yeah.
And that stuff really kind of crystallized the whole thing in my head about, I can make comics and I can do this, on my terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to do house style, and it doesn't have to be comic booky. It can be art.
Yep.
Not to discredit.
No.
Comics in general.
No,
but that's really that helped me to turn a corner, I think.
Okay. Did you feel confined or constrained, or when you were trying to make something look like what you felt that they were, what comics were,
Absolutely. I think I guess I kind of felt like I was chasing something that I was never going to catch.
Okay.
Some people got it, some people don't. I'm on a different path, I think. So
Yeah.
that should help me discover that fact.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say something about that sort of being on your recognizing your own path, because like it's not like it's strange. Like I don't know like how sensitive to my own sort of what I wanted to do-ness was there for me when I was young. I think I might have been very focused on like I want to draw the comic book characters I love. That was sort of like, so that was the sort of predominant kind of choice I was making. So all the hard work went into, does this look like a comic book page? Like, and that was a kind of a big motivator. And it's interesting because I can remember times when people would look at things that weren't comic book stuff, like they were things from a sketchbook or other pieces, and people who I respect, immensely, were like, "Hey, what's this? This is really interesting." And I would go, "Oh yeah, blah, 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 blah." And and then, but I'm thinking like, yeah, but look at this comic book page thing, whatever it was. So like I couldn't like it was interesting that I didn't have that sort of like at the time to go like, oh, if I try to like chase that might be the thing that more people go like, oh, well, that's unique and special in you, versus that looks like a good comic page. Well done,
Yep. You absolutely, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So I mean, the reason I bring it up is that like, if someone's young and trying to figure out what they, the difference between wanting to do the thing that they want to do, but the thing that they might need to do, like sometimes you need to kind of listen and kind of be more, because like rarely are people giving you advice to harm you. They're giving you advice to help you. So
sure.
So you, I mean, but what was like, so you went off to art school, but like did you like, were you like, what were you focusing on? What were you thinking? Like, what was the vision in your head of like, what am I going to do with this time that I'm going off to art school, and what's the result of this?
Yeah, I initially, I wasn't entirely sure
You had
where it was going to lead to. And I guess that's what foundation year is all about. That first year, everybody takes the same classes. You get a taste of all of it. And then in your second year, you need to figure out what your major is going to be. So I came in kind of a weird spot because I went to a university down in Portsmouth for 2 years out of high school, got an associate degree in just general artistic studies.
Right.
So, ceramics, drawing, painting, all that stuff. Got my associate degree, took all of those English classes and math classes and sociology classes and all that jazz. So by the time I transferred over into art school, I didn't have to deal with any of that stuff. I didn't have to pay art school prices for all those things. So I was in first year and second year at the same time because I had a lot of sophomore classes in addition to some of the foundation classes that I didn't get transfer credit for. But I was pretty sure that I wanted to kind of make an illustration focus.
Okay.
Because that's something I thought, I could kind of parlay that into the comic book thing if I want to, or I could do the editorial thing if I wanted to, or whatever. So there's a lot of options in the illustration front. And I didn't think I had enough to say to really go into fine art. And advertising seemed a little sterile to me. And so, illustration seemed to fit what I was doing best of all. So that's what my major ended up being. And I had a few really good instructors. One guy in particular was worked in a style that was kind of similar to my own, and being kind of a pen and ink, kind of a detailed pen and ink style.
Yeah.
And so he, he could see what I was doing and where I wanted to go with it, and he was very encouraging and very helpful. And very critical sometimes, but
Mhm.
that's what we need. So um, it was a good place to be at that time. I think he was a good guy to have in my corner.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it is great, man. I mean, nothing feels better when you're young and trying to, figure it out when an instructor, teacher, whomever is really says like, "Oh, you're doing like they can figure you out and they can sort of just put those breadcrumbs right in front of you to like lead you to that next sort of level." Like there was I'm sure it was a drawing instructor, but I have this practice of constantly switching my tools out because I'll plateau. So I'm like, I need to like get a new tool in my hand. And I'm
Yeah,
sure like it was one of those things where I was doing a horrible version of whatever the model was posing. And so the instructor was like, hey, try this, just reach into my box, pull something out, and I'm like, it was probably like Vine charcoal, my most hated thing in the world or something,
right.
and I was like, okay. But what it did is it forced me to kind of map my brain and figure out how to solve that sort of visual
Yeah,
problem.
you have a little mental reboot.
Yeah, it's super, super important. And and the thing is it works in so many aspects because you can, maybe you're doing all right drawing or writing or whatever the thing that you do, but like change your location, change the material you're working on, change the thing you're doing, and it'll always make you better.
Yeah.
Uh, so did you, I mean, like, so you armed yourself with a good portfolio and did you just head, and how did you like set out like saying, okay, I'm graduating and now what do I do? I mean, what's the because like in New York City, it's like, that's where I went to art school. It feels a little safer in some
Mhm.
weird way that you're like, of course I'm going to get work. It's New York City. There's a million things here. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I well, you know, I guess I while I was going to art school, I was
Mhm.
working full time as well,
Okay.
and so I just kind of stayed with that. I was actually working in a comic book shop at the time.
Oh, okay.
Um, really, really good comic book shop in Central Ohio that's now no longer with us, but we won an Eisner and all that stuff. So we were doing good work, and we had regular conversations with reps from publishers. We had our DC Comics rep calling us once a week, so I got to talk to these people, and I made a lot of good industry connections.
Oh, okay.
Through that job, we had a lot of people in. Brian Bendis lived in Cleveland at the time, so
Oh,
he was in and out of the store occasionally. We would have him in do signings, and he'd stop by from time to time. So I got to hang out with Bendis, and David Mack was in Cincinnati, so he was just down the road too. Columbus is a good place for comics. We've got a lot of really talented people right here in town. Jeff Smith lives in town here.
yeah.
Chris Sprouse is here. Daryl Bank.
Right. That's right.
So it's a good community. So I made a lot of really good connections during the time I was working at the comic shop. Went out of business in '98, and so shortly after that, one of the guys that I knew from the comic shop was working for a children's publisher, and he was able to get me in there doing graphic design work. And so I've been doing that kind of primarily ever
Mhm.
since.
Yeah.
Um, kind of marketing art and stuff. It's not terribly glamorous, but it's a living.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I mean, my graphic design business is that's what pays the bills, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and that's how I do it, and I take pride in doing good work for it, but it's not what I wake up in the morning going, can't wait to do this.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
other stuff.
you get it. You totally get it, and that allows me, I think, comics work is laborious.
Yes.
It's outrageous, and it's not. Holy cow! If comic book artists charge by the hour like freelance illustrators do,
Right.
nobody could afford to make a comic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of something that if you're gonna do it for a living, you got to take what you can get.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to just do whatever job is there, you can't make a living at it. And so I'm at peace with that.
Yeah.
You know, I take jobs that I want to do, that are interesting to me, that I feel like I can really contribute to. And it's a rewarding, you know, thing.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's like, I mean, if you do what you want to do versus what you have to do in the world, you're going to arguably be a happier person. And
yeah, absolutely.
So what, I mean, like, how did getting, I guess, like your first sort of work in whatever form of comic books it was happen for you? And like, what was your mindset with that whole time?
You know, I was always, you know, like I said, I was always doing my little 5-page X-Men stories that I'm going to mail in, and
Sure.
And that's my submission and all that stuff. And I did that for a while, and it's just so annoying. And so at some point, kind of the switch went off in my brain. I was like, you know, I'm going to write it my own story. I'm just going to do a thing. You know, I'm going to create a thing. I'm going to write this thing. I'm going to draw this thing. I'm going to letter it. It's going to be a complete story, page 1 to page whatever.
Yeah.
Ended up being 5 pages, and through it was when I was working at the comic shop, and we had Joe Pruitt from Caliber in for one of our store signings, and he was the editor of Negative Burn at the time, and he saw it, he liked it, he wanted to run it in Negative Burn, so we ran it in Negative Burn, and that was that. You know, I mean, it was the first thing that I had written and illustrated myself, and there it is. And
okay, so like, I mean, let's look for like, so what was like? I mean, do you remember like what was running through your mind when that sort of kind of happened? I mean, was it shock? Like, what was happening in your mind?
No, I don't think it was shock, really. It was more of a relief than anything to say that, hey, this actually somebody likes it.
Hey, cool.
You know, this works. I can do this. You know, it was very validating.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's, well, I mean, like, what, I mean, to sort of like stop yourself from doing the thing that you thought that you needed to do to make comic books, and said, oh, I'm going to do my thing. Because at that point you're not saying like, I need to get this so I can eat tomorrow. Like I just need to do it because it's what I need to do. Yeah. So you do it, and then you're validated, you know, by this engagement with this person who's like, yeah, this is absolutely worth publishing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so what, I mean, what do you do after that? Like you get it done and you're like, okay, more like, oh, what is,
well, and yeah, that was the nice thing about Caliber. Caliber was really good to me. They were in Michigan, which was, you know, right next door.
Yep.
But after I ran that, I got that, this is the story in with Joe. Of course, Gary Reed was the publisher at Caliber at that time. The whole time, I guess, Gary Reed is Mr. Caliber. But Gary really kind of, I was on Gary's wavelength, I think.
Okay.
And so he really didn't waste any time. He got a hold of me, and he had this big project that he'd been sitting on for a long time, waiting for somebody to come along that could draw this thing for him. And he thought I was going to be the guy.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, I'm a little drunk on all this anyway. So I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
Not really realizing what I was in for, because this is, you know, and it ended up being this 130-page, you know, basically graphic novel. And I had never ever even thought about anything that large before, you know, and that is a tremendous undertaking. And being the novice that I was, I really had underestimated what a gargantuan task that was going to be to get through. But I'm the kind of person that has to finish, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Once I get into something and I give my word, I got to be accountable.
Well, that's so I want to carry on with this, but that's like, it's so important in that respect because, I was sitting here thinking like the thing that popped in my head is like, well, that's why you're sitting here talking with me. And not that talking with me is the big special thing that in your life, but what I'm saying is that like the highway of creativity is, littered with abandoned things.
Oh, sure.
And it's not to say that every successful person, never abandoned something, but the thing is like the only way you're going to get that success is to get through it. You have to get through it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you can be really sort of prescient and say, okay, well, if my goal is to do this, whatever that long-term goal is, and like, if I have a 130-page graphic novel, I can go get work doing almost anything because I'm showing that I can do this volume of work. Now, sure. that's and Adam Gorham did exactly that. He did like a 120-page graphic novel as his first thing, and really, and basically he made his own ticket. He's like, what, who else wants to have some great work? So like, that's a huge thing. But and you're telling the story and you're good at it, because I was like, oh no, like, did he bail? Did he stop? And you're like, nope, went through. So like, fighting your way through is super, super important. And like, it's, and it's great the way you express that. Okay. So you're doing this thing and I'm sure you're feeling buried while you're working on it.
I was feeling pretty buried. Yeah, it was right. It was just maybe a year after I just got married, and I was living in this small apartment, and I'm just, every day I'm in there just cranking away at this thing, trying to get it done. And it was not, it was not a very comic booky kind of story. It was called Ghost Sonata, and it was this story based on a play by August Strindberg, and it was cerebral and I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it, but it was not something that you would imagine would make a good comic.
Right.
But again, being new to this, I had no idea, so I just made it work. I made it my own, and and we pushed on through that sucker, and it came out. So you can still buy it today. It's available now.
Well, so like, how? Okay, so you absorbed Frank Miller, you absorbed Arthur Adams, you absorbed the John Byrne, the modern king of comic books.
Yeah.
Like, you absorbed their artwork and storytelling, and that must have been your sort of like basic algebra in your head of like, okay, well, here's what I need to do. And how did you face something that didn't have sort of like a kinetic solution, like, this is storytelling, but not like action storytelling?
Well, by that time I had also, Dave McKean had come out with Cages.
Okay.
And, and that was another like serious paradigm shift for me, and Cages being just how expressive and loose that art style was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of adapted a little more, I don't know, a little idiosyncratic kind of art style for it. But I was still really focused on, like a Frank Miller, a Steranko kind of storytelling.
Yeah.
And for me, when I set these things up, the storytelling part is the most laborious, time-consuming, mentally exhausting part of the process to get those panel layouts to work. And then once that's done, drawing, it's fun part.
Yeah. Well, looking at your work, like, being that pen, ink artist, like, if you didn't like drawing, then you picked the wrong art style.
Sure. Yes, exactly.
So I can see that, because it's so funny, because for me, a lot of it was, if I could have stopped right after like roughing in the page,
mm-hmm.
like getting everything locked in the way it needs to be on the storytelling level and the actual structure of all the pieces and all the, figures and everything, I would be fine. Would have been fine handing it off to someone just to finish that, the rendering and all that stuff. Cause it was just, to me, I'm like, oh, I got to draw it again. That was
yeah. The finishing is the fun part. And so much so that I don't pencil really. My pencil work is super minimal, because so much of the way that my images look are accomplished in the ink technique.
Yeah.
And it's not the kind of thing that I can simulate in pencil. I just kind of really roughly carve this stuff out. And and when I'm able to go to work with the brush and the pen, that's when it all starts to work for me.
Totally. No, I can absolutely see that looking at the art. I mean, there's this, because I mean, it would get muddy quickly if you had to pencil it like that and then ink on top of that and then try to erase it. So
yeah, and a lot of the ink work even is still just experimenting on the fly too, because I don't know how this is going to look, but it's got light and it's got dark, so we'll make it work. So
yeah, this is a great example of allowing the paper, to just become the light source. So in
light source, yes,
in the most beautiful of ways. So it's gorgeous.
Thank you.
So I mean, so now what you're let's say you're done. You've got this graphic novel. What's your okay, now what do I do? Are you thinking of do I want to become a graphic novelist? I mean, what is your sort of self-talk?
Yeah, and again, I like I said before, I'm not an idea person. I don't have that story bottled up inside of me that I got to get out, like so many people do. And there's all these people that have got these original characters that they want to do things with. Nah, not me. I am perfectly happy, especially after the experience that I had with Gary doing Ghost Sonata, and getting the scripts in from Gary and sitting down and interpreting that kind of that worked for me.
Cool.
Letting somebody else, get those big arcs in place and get those ideas down, and then I give it visuals. And so that's the way pretty much all of the comics work that I've done since then has been like that. I'll occasionally knock out a 5-page script or something myself for some kind of anthology book or whatever. So, I'll write, but only in very short subjects. I've never had really any desire to write something big and epic and sweeping.
Right. Well, and it's, I mean, maybe because when you were saying about doing the page, that the big fight and struggle happens with, the layout, the storytelling, that kind of aspect of making that work. And then the fun begins, which becomes the actual, drawing. So I would only kind of gather that writing, which is now 2 steps away from the actual rendering and drawing aspect of it, might even be a greater wrestling match for you to say.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. I can kind of see how that would come to fruition. And listen, how many amazing comic books are done, written by one person and illustrated by another. I mean, yeah. So I mean, it's a system that works for a reason. So I'm not saying ditch your drawing tools and start writing, son. But I would say just pick the thing that makes you mad and feel like you got a magic wand in your hand.
Yeah.
So how did so you're in this sort of mini hotbed of comic books of central-ish Ohio, and did you start seeing I'm going to go to? Did you start going to conventions at a time, or?
I was again right around 95. I started going because we had Mid Ohio Con in Columbus at that time. That's no longer around, but that was I think the first convention I went to maybe was, apart from little 1-day hotel shows in town, was the Chicago Comic-Con in 92.
Okay. Wow.
And that was when DC was there launching Vertigo. And so Neil Gaiman was there and Garth Ennis was there. And, I got to meet Ted McKeever and Axel Alonso and
yeah,
all these cool people who
young Axel Alonso,
who were doing all this great stuff, and I made a lot of good connections that year too. So we drive out to Chicago to Rosemont every year to check that out.
Yeah.
And then 95, I think, was the first Mid Ohio Con that I went to. And then in 96, I ended up, that was after I'd already started working at Caliber. So I was able to get my own table that time. So that was a big deal. Get on the other side of the table at a Comic-Con, especially your big home convention. So, and so that was about the same time. Jim Pruitt, who was an editor at Caliber, invited me up to Motor City Con in Detroit, and let me sleep in his house and all that stuff. So that was super cool. And he had Michael Gaydos was there that weekend too, and he was staying in the house with us. So I got to meet Michael, and so many people working at Caliber at that time. It was a very cool place to be, and going to Motor City was awesome. And they did 2 conventions a year, and Caliber brought me in for that. And at that time, DC and Marvel used to have publisher booths at Motor City Con.
The 90s were a really, really interesting time for conventions that, they're not like that anymore.
No, absolutely not. No, you got like New York and San Diego are one thing.
Yeah.
And then everything else is entirely different. So
they're all self-supported outside of New York and San Diego. Those are the only two that really the Marvel and DC pay attention to. But I think in the 90s, it was sort of the US and the Soviet Union kind of thing of they were just oh, wait, DC's going to go. Okay, we're going to have a setup there. Oh, Marvel's going to be there. Okay, well, we're going to have a bigger set. And it was just this battle on the floors.
Yeah, it was so cool. At the time, I was working at the comic book shop, and so our DC rep that would call us every week was there working the booth, and so she kind of got me into dinner with James Robinson and John McCrae and Steve Lieber and all these people who were working at DC at the time, and it was a really cool thing to be a part of.
It is really cool. I got out of the business of comics, 22 years ago, I guess. And, but it's it is, the thing that I miss the most, maybe the feeling of sort of finishing a piece is always a great feeling, but it was the people. So many amazing, wonderful people who just are all passionate about the same ridiculous, stapled object, but we're all really into it. And, and then now it's this great thing because it's everyone's still so passionate about this thing, but now it's not just what's being published by these two major companies. It's so many things and so many subjects, and it's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's the best. So yeah, unlike now, conventions also had lots of editors in them. The editors went to these shows because they were talent seeking because there was no internet.
They were recruiting, right?
Yeah, it was the most amazing time because you could make a sort of friendship relationship with another artist or writer on the floor, and then you need to come and meet my editor, and then next thing you know, you're having this brief distracted conversation with an editor who oh, this is really cool, here's my card, give me a call and we'll talk some more, that kind of thing. And and I don't get the sense that it operates that way anymore in that respect. I'm sure it does happen, and I hope it does for more than less. But was that an experience that you had? Did you get that sort of cross-pollination at a show to meet someone and get some work?
Yeah, that was the whole point. In the early 90s, when I was still in art school, you walk around with your big portfolio and you see who's doing art reviews, what editors are here.
Yep.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of people, had a lot of portfolio reviews, got a lot of good feedback.
Yeah, no, it's great. And how did it feel for you? once you got on the other side of the table, did you put your flag up, saying, hey, I'll do reviews right away? Or did you or were you surprised, shocked at when someone sort of stumbled up to you and sheepishly asked if that you would look at their work?
Yeah, absolutely. I still don't like doing reviews. I don't
Really?
feel I still have that imposter syndrome about it.
Okay.
So.
That's interesting. I was talking about the imposter syndrome thing, and it's really kind of remarkable. I was in the comic book industry as a professional for 10 years. So let's just say, and never did, and never achieved where I wanted to achieve in the industry, but never felt like an imposter, because I had a piece of paper from, the School of Visual Arts that says I can draw comic books.
Right.
Now for 22 years, I've been, a graphic designer and an art director for some really major companies around the world. And I have a complete imposter syndrome about the whole thing because I don't have a piece of paper. It's stupid, it's dumb.
The things our brains do to us.
Oh, it's ridiculous. But the funny thing is, so you have the imposter syndrome. Like, what do you feel is the source, or what did you feel was the source of that sort of sense for you? Because you had an art degree in art, you had done comic book work. Somebody said, sit at this table because we would like you to sit here. So all those boxes have been checked.
Yeah.
What was it for you that said,
I don't know. It's hard to say. And I don't know that I can point to any, one thing in particular.
Yeah.
About that. It's just kind of a lifelong, mindset that there are people doing this that are a lot better at it than I am. And so why am I here?
Sure. No, because I guess the reason I ask is I think it's just that everyone faces it. Everybody faces. Maybe there's the rare few who don't, but I would assume that they're probably narcissists or
with their Jim Steranko, right?
Well, yeah, right, exactly. Or just so amazing at what they can do that there's no question that they can't do whatever it is.
Right.
But it's a thing, and because that the guts it takes to walk up to somebody when you have a portfolio in your hand to say, hey, would you take a look at my artwork? That's a huge bridge to cross for many, many people. And that sensibility, so the reason I bring it up is that everyone's fighting that imposter syndrome in some fashion. I don't even know if I should I show my work? Should I talk? That kind of thing. And, often, we're fortunate to have people around us who are no, go talk to that person, or that they trick you into it, or they do it, or they set it up for you, whatever it is. But next thing you know, you're doing the thing, and it's like jumping off the, the bridge or the little cliff into the water. It's the most horrifying idea in your head. Then you do it, and the first thing you want to do is run back up and do the jump again.
Do it again, yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of how that works, unless you get torn apart and then you're
right.
You run away. So
seen that happen, yeah.
Which does happen, So how did so you've you've sort of designed your creative output around the frame of you've got a regular thing going, so you don't have to struggle to say, I need that. So how does that factor into your selection process? Because it does afford you a lot of latitude.
Right. Yeah. The thing about being, a comics artist, there's always somebody looking for a comics artist.
Yeah.
And
yes, they're always, hey, I've got this idea for a graphic, yeah.
Yeah. But it's just there's writers everywhere, and everybody's got something that they wanna get out there. And so sure. I get contacted a lot about stuff, and so it's you know, and again, since this isn't my primary source of income, it's something that I can say, you know, I don't think I want to devote 6 months, 8 months, a year or
Right.
more of
Yeah.
my life to doing just this. You know, it's got to be something that you know, is fulfilling for me in some way.
Yeah. That's, you know, and that's, I mean, that's a really, I mean, it's an amazing luxury in so many ways. But the idea that you can make those choices really like takes so much like, or like I said, it lends so much to your creative process because you're going to be that much more engaged
Totally.
from this thing, and it's not going to be coming from what might be a predictable source.
Mm-hmm.
You could certainly find, like, someone could just be randomly like do the, hey, well, I got this idea for a graphic novel, and rather than dismissing it, since you don't have to, like, you're like, well, you don't have any money, you're not going to pay me, and like, you can go like, well, what is it, you know, and you can talk, and next thing you know, like, you're like, hear this idea that just is, you know, oh wow, this is something that could really be amazing.
Sure.
Yeah. How long, like, let's just say like someone says, hey, I've got this 20-page story, you know, you agree to do a 20-page story that you just love. Like, how long does it take you to produce that artwork, just so, like, you know, on your regular schedule?
You know, I guess, you know, 3 years ago I would have said, you know, about a page a day worth, but since this whole pandemic business came through and I work from home now instead of going to the office.
Oh wow.
My leisure art has really kind of taken a hit.
Okay.
From that, because, you know, in the past I would go to the office in the morning, I would do my job, I would get in the car, and as I'm driving home, I'm thinking, okay, what do I need to work on this evening? You know, what kind of project have I got on the desk tonight? And I get home, I get to my desk, and I'm like, all right, let's do this. But, you know, now I'm at this desk already for 8-9 hours, and I go at my dinner, and the last thing I want to do is go back in and sit down again.
Right. To
in
get
the
up
very same spot and work some more. So, you know, it's been sort of a struggle to balance that while working from home. So I don't produce as much as I used to. So, you know, I can get in that mindset with that kind of get on a roll with it.
Right.
And I can crank out a page a day sometimes. But you know, I prefer to do maybe 4 to 5 pages in a week.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's still a pretty good clip. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, there are people take a lot longer to do their work.
Well, yeah, it's a momentum thing, you know. I kind of you have to keep that kind of pace if you're going to stay. Personally, I think if you're going to stay on it, stay in the groove.
Yep.
You need to keep that momentum going because kind of work. I'm a momentum artist.
Well, I think I think that's a creator thing, period. I think, I mean, like, you know, I write prose predominantly, and if I'm writing every single day and I'm producing, you know, numbers every day, that number rarely goes down. It typically just keeps going up. Even if I'm like doing 2,000 words a day, it's going to be, you know, 2,500, 2,700, you know, 75. It's going to slowly, you know, grow.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at a larger graph, you know, there's going to be little ups and downs, but I think it is that consistency, because I think, you know, it's like anything. Like, if you don't do it every day, your production, your level is going to decrease, and your ability to do it, and that momentum, as you say, man, like, if you get that going, man, you can be working.
It's like that with anything, I guess. You know, going to the gym, whatever. You know, it's all a matter of being in a groove.
I mean, so like, one of my tricks for sort of working around what you're struggling with, because I know it, like, I've had like that. I remember struggling, like, trying to do freelance stuff and doing my client design work at home years ago, and that was really tough. And then I worked in an office for years, and I really was happy when I finally left the office.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty darn good at my home office, but I don't have a very like super dedicated home office currently. So what I do is I have a co-working space for writing that I go to in the mornings. So I go over there every Monday through Friday and I write, and then I come home and then I do my client design work.
Yeah.
Which is super helpful because I don't come back here. Like I'm not like working at the same space thinking like, oh, now I gotta do the thing. Now the trouble is every time I turn on the email, a client email will come in and like, oh,
Right.
But it is super tough to do that balancing act when it's in the same space.
Yep.
Any chance you can get back in the office?
Our office is open now.
Yeah.
Our creative services department is just remote. Our creative director decided that everybody was doing great remotely, and so we're going to continue to be remote because 90% of people in the office love that.
Yep.
But I'm just kind of one of those rare exceptions that just does not work well that way. So I guess I am free to go into the office whenever I please.
Yeah.
But there's nobody there, and so it's just a little awkward and weird. So.
Yeah, I think and that's it's interesting because like I know like I have some good friends who were in the advertising industry, and they were all sent home, and they're all like dancing a jig because they're like, I don't have to go into the office.
Right.
And I remember talking with one of them. I'm like, like there's going to be a point when the people who look at the larger picture are going to realize that like there's a big loss happening. And the big loss is, especially with creative companies, the ability to have those, atomic collisions that need to happen for a new idea to happen. Yeah. So when these people are bumping into something and then they see something and they say, well, what if we did this? And then next thing you know, the new thing happens. That doesn't really happen when people are 30, 40 miles apart, sitting in their PJs working on a laptop. So it's so like, and like, I know like, he's like, yeah, they want us to come back to the offices. I'm like, well, of course they do. They want to like, because their clients are going like, hey, these campaigns aren't as zippy as they were 2 years ago. Like it's a thing. So, well, man, I totally sympathize. I can get that. I get that sort of that same sameness and like, don't want to be in that same spot. You just take another room over and make a comic book studio room and then have your work room.
Yeah, that would probably be helpful. I mean, in a pretty small house at the time. I don't have a lot of room to work with. So,
well, listen, this is why God created coffee shops, right?
It's true. That's true.
Go there and do the work there. I don't know, but I get it. I get it. It's no fun, Andy. I wouldn't want to be in that wrestling match. I've been there. It's not a joyous thing. So, but back to the pace, that's a pretty decent pace to be like, as your cottage industry side hustle, that's still a really good pace.
I think some of it has to do with just my attention span. I can't devote that much time to something. I get tired of it. So I got to knock it out.
But you work
that relates to the whole business with Inktober and and that's those things. I knock those out in like 90 minutes, and people are just flabbergasted by this. They're like, if I have to work on those things for more than 90 minutes, I'm not going to do it.
Well, and they're rightfully flabbergasted. I mean, like, these are fantastic. What gave you the sort of the inspiration to like say, hey, I'm going to do like Muppets?
Well, that was pretty late in the game. I had already done 4 years worth of Inktober and then kind of went on to this one. But the first year, I just kind of fluked into Inktober. I was October 1st and I was doing a drawing just for the heck of it. And I'm online and I see all these people posting this Inktober stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's October. Maybe I can do this thing. So
Yeah. Oops.
and so I started doing it, and before I knew it, the end October's over, and I did it, and so that's, like we were talking about earlier. It's like I'm committed to something, so I'm gonna see this
Yep.
thing through. So, and it was a good experience, and having that accountability. Of when you share this stuff every day and people start expecting it,
Yep.
really keeps me on task. And so it was pretty rewarding to get that out of my system for a whole month, and it was cool, and I enjoyed it. So I did it again the next year. And so by the time I get to 2019, I'm like getting super analytical about this thing. I'm like, I'm the Inktober guy, so I got to do this right. So a lot of Inktober boils down to, keeping yourself interested.
Yeah.
For a month, because it's super easy to get burned out. Yes. And you see people do it all the time. They'll do 5 days worth and then they disappear. And it's not in my makeup to do that.
No,
so I need to have a subject that's going to keep me entertained for a month, and something I can get good reference photos for, and something other people are going to enjoy. And so I don't even remember how I settled on I think that year was the 50th anniversary of Sesame Street. So Henson was in the news. And I'm a huge Henson devotee. I was, from as long as I can remember, early as I can remember, Sesame Street was my jam, and I could read before I went to kindergarten because I watched Sesame Street relentlessly.
Sure.
And so, it's real deep in my soul, so that's where, I put 2 and 2 together at that point and decided to give that one a shot. And that was probably one of the biggest, growth years in my career, really, just getting through that thing and getting that stuff out there and connecting with all of the, fans and followers and stuff. It was a cool experience.
Well, I mean, there's 50 years of fandom, tied to this thing, and it's not, and it's a fandom that's tied deep into us because, we're either really small children when we first engaged with this thing, and it's something that never spoke down to us, or it was that thing that you got to share with your family on Sunday night during the Muppet Show,
right?
Which was really that was a thing. We would sit down and watch the Muppet Show. I can't believe adults sat with me watching the show. They loved it too. So, and they're wonderful. So so you said like 45 minutes of half hour to 45 minutes of work with these?
I probably about an hour on average.
Okay.
Some of them go longer. There are a few that would hit maybe 90 minutes, maybe pushing 2 hours at the extreme end of it.
Yeah. And are you throwing white ink on top of like is that splatter of white ink there? And,
yep.
And the swirlies, you're throwing the white ink on top of the black. That's cool.
Yep, with the white pens and a little bit of the white white splatter.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And and it's just, I mean, nice touch with your shading. It's tasteful.
And the stuff really working like that on a daily basis, using that same technique, for that amount of time, it really kind of it really helps you develop I don't know, I don't want to say a style, but you kind of get your
you're refining that thinking process of how do I tell this same visual sort of solution, with the different characters, and you're just working your way through the cast, and then and saying, okay, well, it's going to be so, okay, here's what I'm going to do, and how do I apply it? Because it's great. I love the hair. The hair is great. Those guys are they're so good. They're such great characters. they're yeah, God, Grover. So cool. It's so cool.
But yeah, it's fun. I start, some of these like that one they're a little maybe overworked. I feel like I always want to go in these things with equal parts, like crusty detailed stuff and super loose brushy stuff, and that
Right.
kind of juxtaposition of the two.
Yeah.
And I have this innate tendency to get too tight with it, to get too detailed with it, and so I always have to kind of pull myself out a little bit.
Right. I mean, like, I feel like I mean, yeah, I mean, you're, but like, I mean, I think you got the brushiness going. I think this one has a nice balance with the heavy brush.
That is one of the more well balanced pieces,
Yeah.
right there. That one really kind of works.
The mid lighting is good. Like but it's not like it's like it's like a little impressionistic, the way, like with the rendering in there. It's not so like it has to be the whole entire thing, and
yeah,
it's got
yeah. And I really like the positive negative, space interplay with that too. So, and that's something I try to get into all of my drawings, some to more successfully than others, but
right. Well, if it was successful every time, then like where would the struggle be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what so what is like? Yeah, I mean, so you find the image that you're interested in, and you just kind of block out your shapes, I guess, lightly with a pencil. Say, okay, that's what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know, like, you have a footprint. So what tools are you starting off with? Like, say for Big Bird here.
Yeah, I think I would. I use a quill.
Okay.
So many people use those micron pens that I just cannot hack. So I use a crow quill, and that's where I'll start in and just get kind of your basic line drawing underway with that. And then that's where the cross hatching comes in on top of that. And the brush pen comes in later, just to get the big shapes in there to kind of set that all off.
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, because you're doing this sort of containment field with the brush work, like it's interesting. Like, did you find a challenge in your mind going, okay, where do I not put a line down? Because I'm
every time.
Yeah. So like, I mean, like, so that you really had to really kind of have a sort of a fixed image in your head of where you wanted that to kind of go.
Yeah, sure. But it's the shape too, just that kind of vignette edge to everything. And the way that brush breaks up a little bit.
Yep.
I love that stuff. And that's something that I kind of get from way back to like Cages, looking at Cages from McKean and how he had the line work and the brush work. And, I aspire to that. I'll never reach that. But I think in the process of trying to reach that is where I find myself. So,
right. I'm sure he'd probably look at this and go, "Oh, cool." So don't worry. I think you're slinging the ink back too. Yeah, I actually love how the loose brush work with the sort of the head feathers of Big Bird are kind of like it gets nice and sort of like which is kind of nice. It's just kind of it's really cool.
Thanks.
So yeah, no, it's cool stuff. And then you have all these like really wonderful like rock and roll pieces, which
oh man, that's such fun stuff. There's a publisher here in Columbus called Nick's Comics, and they're sort of a real kind of rebel independent publisher, and they do a lot of very rock and roll inspired. Their whole jam is rock and roll and horror.
Okay.
And so everything they publish kind of has those elements. And the Ramones piece there was a splash page from one of the comics I did for those guys. There's a fella who lives here in Columbus named Bela Krompecker, who is used to be a record store clerk, roused about back in the 90s. Okay. And he eventually started his own record label. It's just still around now, called Anyway Records. And he's got a blog that he talks about all of his 90s music and life situations, and it's
Mhm.
sort of a brain dump. And the guy is brilliant. He's got 1,000,001 stories.
Yeah.
And the publisher at Nick's discovered this stuff, and he had talked to Bela about kind of synergizing some of these blog posts into kind of a linear story.
Okay.
And he had several different artists that he ran by the guy to see, who he'd like to work with on these things. And he saw my stuff and liked it and wanted to work with me. And so we did 3 different comics based on Bela's writings. This was the first one,
Right.
which was kind of about Bela and his buddy working in the record store. That was in Short North in Columbus. And it was just a few doors down from Newport Music Hall, which is where all the big national acts would play. And so a lot of times the artists would come to the record store, the day before the show or the day of the show. And the Ramones especially were, regulars in there. So every time the Ramones came through town, they always came to the record store. So it's all a story about this big, crazy misadventure evening of the Ramones concert in the record store and getting drunk and getting in fights and all that kind of stuff. So it's
awesome.
It's really rooted in 90s culture.
Yeah.
Pre-internet, whenever you couldn't just follow the Ramones on Facebook, and if you got to actually meet them in person, it was a really big deal.
I love the idea of thinking of following the Ramones on Facebook now.
Right.
Like it's like Joey Ramone posting on Facebook. Oh my God.
And we're kind of glad that never happened, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think the world's better off for that being a case.
Yeah. And so, in doing those rock and roll comics, we did 3 of those. And so I get a lot of commission requests from people for rock and roll inspired
very
stuff.
cool.
And so this Bob Weir was one of those commission requests, and so that was a fun one. I don't know anything of Bob Weir or the Dead, but I do it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean,
the Springsteen was a con sketch. I did that at Heroes Con.
Oh, did you? That's awesome. Yeah. Did you do it while you're sitting there, or did you do it?
Okay. I did it while I was sitting there. Yeah.
Bless you, man. Like it was always such a challenge to do sketches. I mean, back in the day, there wasn't the same sort of competition for, because there really wasn't a commission world back in the 90s. It was a con sketch, and now it's a commission industry. So it's
absolutely. So you got to bring the A game. Yeah.
You have to represent. It's not the same game anymore.
No, but it's excellent though. It's so nice to be able to, have the iPad there and be able to go find reference for stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I was talking to a friend at Heroes, and I had the local comic shop that I go to. We have a lot of comic book stores in Asheville for the size of our city. And one of them asked me to sit and do free comic book day. And I was like, yeah, sure. Cool. No problem. And then I'm like, what did I say yes for? I haven't drawn for, 15 years. And so I show up with all my stuff, and I'm doing sketches, and people handing me, what are those sketch covers, to do things. I'm like, all right,
those things.
I know, way more pressure. And this little 11-year-old boy comes up. I was like, oh, hey, do you want me to do a drawing for you? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, what would you like? And he looks at me and he goes, John Wayne. John Wayne, and now I'm thinking I was on my phone, looking for pictures of John Wayne.
Yeah.
But the iPad would be far more of a useful tool in that sense. So yeah, that's a huge thing. I love the Miles Davis one.
The Miles Davis, that's another Heroes Con commission. So
that's great. So you're kind of now. Did you do rock? Did you do well, you could do Rocktober, your own version.
Yeah, and that's always kind of in my back pocket, because trying to come up with a theme is pretty exasperating every year.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've always had kind of back there waiting, that I'm
Yeah. It's yeah.
that I probably will do one of these years.
I mean, it's a beautiful, yeah. Do Rocktober one year. Yeah, they're very cool. Let's take a quick look at some of the comic book pages that you sent me.
Yeah. Independent publisher stuff. That's all I do is independent publisher stuff. But this was
like a middle grade story for kids.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. No, this was kind of a I get a lot of horror themed stuff because I did a couple of years with Vampire the Masquerade, and so I've done a lot of horror comics. I did some Kolchak the Night Stalker at Moonstone Books.
So cool.
So this story was from a book called Strange Horror, and it was again it was kind of similar to a Kolchak the Night Stalker kind of story. But the guy that wrote it, Gary Scott Beatty is his name. He's a great guy, and he was really open to let me do my thing,
Yeah.
And so being able to go in here and get a reference for all this crazy architecture and putting all these wild light and shadow business and stuff. I had a good time with it.
That's rad.
And that's that's Marian Anderson from Washington, D.C. That's some biographical stuff. There's a guy, Matt Dimbishke, who's from the Washington, D.C. area, who published a book called District Comics. It was an anthology thing that was all kind of comic stories centered around Washington, D.C. and people and places and phenomena of Washington, D.C.
Right on.
From stuff like Bad Brains concerts to Revolutionary War stuff to modern day stuff, and then this is one that I ended up doing. This was published online; it never made it into print, but it was written by a guy named Jeff Campfire, and 2-page story. So I was able to kind of devote a whole lot of time to really getting in there and doing the thing. So there was a lot of outrageous detail going on, but I thought really to convey the scope of this thing, it kind of had to be. So
yeah, and but the composition is great for the page. Like it really, like you do all the things to move the eye around to the right spots, and it's.
I hope so. So. Yeah, that's again, the storytelling is such a hard part of it, and I find that so many times I think I'm not that good at it, and I see people that are good at it, and it makes me angry. But
yeah, that's what baseball bats for. Go get them in the dark alley. No, the layouts works really well. This is the Ramon story.
That's another page from the Ramones comic. Yeah, that was the big Joey Ramone reveal when he came down the fire escape on the back of the Newport Music Hall, and the bouncer was trying to kick the guys out, and Joey comes down and says, "Hey, these guys get into the show or we're not playing." So
right,
that was the big shock moment. So that's the faces in the bottom there responding to that.
Oh, bless Joey Ramone.
Yeah,
we're glad for that. Oh, that's more. So it's more
the same. That was after they decided that they couldn't get into the Ramone show. They decided to go get drunk. So
nice. It's very cool. Yeah,
the backgrounds though were a big deal for me. That was one of the things that that very first story that I wrote for Negative Burn way back when.
Okay, this is
this is not. I don't have any of the pages from that in there, but that was something that I kind of taught myself at that time.
Okay,
was doing backgrounds and making them work. Because that's kind of something a lot of beginners don't want to do is backgrounds. And I kind of put myself in a spot where I wanted the backgrounds to tell some story as well, and I wanted to kind of make them a little more personal and put a lot more into them. And so from since then, that's kind of been a big thing for me, is that environment. And so that's kind of what I was going for here. The city, 90s Columbus is as big a part of this story as the people in it are. So
Right.
it was important to kind of get those places and make them real, make them work.
It makes me think of like I was listening to an interview with Michael Mann, and I'm thinking about like how important the place is in a Michael Mann film versus versus his peerage, which would be somewhere like on one end of being Stanley Kubrick all the way to like Ridley Scott, they were all sort of peers at one point.
Mm-hmm.
In the late 70s, early 80s. But like for Mann, like the space that the characters are in is as important as the characters
and what they're doing. Yeah, absolutely.
And it really sets him apart as a visual, storyteller, and how he treats this, the narrative in that respect. And so like for that, you're thinking in that term, you're sort of approaching it in that manish way. I don't know. Man-esque way. I don't know. Man-esque. That sounds a little less weird. Yeah. And so I totally get that, because I mean, no, we don't want to draw the backgrounds, but they really are. They're what put the characters in the story. Otherwise it's just a fight in space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or struggle in space. Let's call it struggle.
Sure. And there's so much, it's such a rewarding thing to put something down and make it work and make it look good. And so it's kind of become a focus of mine when I'm laying out a page to have at least a good, establishing shot like that.
Yeah, no, and it is so important, yeah. And it's listen, storytelling 101. You gotta let your reader know where they are, and then keep them grounded in that world.
Yeah,
and I want to circle back to this, because this is just a wonderful piece. It's great. When did you do this?
That was Inktober 2017.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
I did all Tim Burton that month, so you got your Beetlejuice stuff, your Batman, and your Edward Scissorhands, and Sleepy Hollow, and Ed Wood, and all that stuff.
No, it's totally cool. Yeah, and I mean, in a total subject of our our child, or I guess our young selves. I mean, Winona is like. She's our poster child,
Oh, so, for sure. She's our Generation X poster child, no doubt.
Yeah,
and that was actually an Inktober postscript, because I did a Lydia back, early in the month, and it just ate at me the whole month that man, I did not like that Lydia. And being a daily, drawing thing, and you put in an hour and a half on it, I'm not going to start over and do another one the same night. So I'm going to let that one sit. And then November 1st, I'm going to do another Lydia. So that's what
bonus
I did
track.
First. So
bonus track. Everyone likes those things.
It's a bonus track, yes.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. So come on, hide. There you go. It's lagging. Are you working on any projects right now that you're excited about?
Yeah. I tell you, I'm working with a guy right now named Joel Meadows, who is the publisher of Tripwire magazine in the UK. It's kind of a comics journal-esque publication, only not quite so highbrow. Tripwire gets a little more into the pop culture of things, and they're not afraid to run an article about Hellboy or whatever.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, I met Joel at a Pittsburgh Comic-Con in probably 2006 or something. And, and we talked, and we have a lot of similar sensibilities and things. And so he's, again, like Gary Reed, he's got this story that he'd been wanting to get out all this time. And we've been talking about it for years. And so just a few years ago, we started kind of trying to make it happen. So it's called Sherlock Holmes and the Empire Builders. And it's kind of an alternate history sort of story with a over the hill past his prime Sherlock Holmes who's lost his house and is kind of, and Watson is gone. And so he's off on his own, but he's still got it.
Yeah.
And so he's writing this thing, and it's eventually going to be a pretty large collection of things. But we're kind of doing it, he and I both don't have the time to devote to putting out a 150-page graphic novel all in one go. So we're serializing this thing, 8-10 pages at a time in Tripwire magazine.
Sure.
So we've done, I think, maybe 3 sort of chapters thus far, and I'm working on a 4th right now. And it's some pretty rewarding stuff too, kind of like the Columbus rock and roll books. It's got a very specific kind of time and place and feel to it. So it takes a lot of reference hunting and, a little bit of mental, jumps to try and kind of imagine what this environment's going to look like, because I can't just pick up the exact same things, because it is kind of an alternate history thing. And so you have to take these, maybe these buildings that have been destroyed, that, what would they look like now, and things like that. So,
I love alternate history. I was having a very, very a conversation about that earlier today with a writer acquaintance, and I watched yesterday, this last weekend. So it's the Danny Boyle movie about the sort of the conceit is that the Beatles.
Oh, the Beatles one, yes.
Yeah, and it's good. But I really would have loved it if the writers had sort of dug into what the world really like. That we got a better picture of what the world looked like without the Beatles in it.
Yes, we got a very narrow view of it. Yes,
like we didn't get.
It would probably be a lot more widespread.
Like, we don't get Coca-Cola. I'm like, okay, but the Coca-Cola predates the Beatles, so like, does Coke not being here, is that what stops the Beatles from not being like? It was one of those kinds of like. But I would love to have seen like what this sort of the worldview was without those 4 individuals, because they they did a lot. But I love alternate reality, stuff, alternate history, whatever you want to call it. Fiction is just fascinating to me because it really allows you to kind of, it's like a mashup approach to storytelling. You can kind of take the thing that we all know, but push in a different thing in there, and everyone gets a kind of a new view of it. There's a great book by Michael Chabon, the author, about an elder Sherlock Holmes.
Really?
It's like a 100-page kind of novella. I highly recommend it in reading it. I think you would dig it. It's a good one. So you can find it and read it in a couple of days. It's not a big deal. And it's beautifully written. So I'll send you the information on it. So that way,
great,
because we all forget everything. So that sounds super exciting, like really exciting as a project. And so can we find those on Tripwire? Like, is there a way to look at the ones that have already been sent out? Hello, doggy.
Oh, yeah, the dog's needy today.
Okay.
Yeah, we have Tripwire has been publishing more like big twice yearly specials, these big fat collections, like in spring and fall.
Okay.
And I believe they probably are available through Tripwire's website.
All right. Well,
I guess I couldn't tell you for sure right now.
I'm gonna see if I can track them down, because I mean, to me, the subject matter is just right up my alley, and if you're illustrating that, then it's even more of an incentive.
Yeah, we're planning right now. They do kind of fundraiser, sort of Kickstarter style fundraisers before the big specials come out, so people can put in pre-orders for things.
Okay, cool.
So those will usually get shared big time through my social channels.
Sweet.
Whenever those are happening.
I'll keep an eye on it. Now, do you guys have plans of doing a collected edition for the whole
thing? Yeah. The end game really is to probably end up self-publishing the thing.
Yeah.
We have spoken with a few different publishers, and we're trying to, find one that kind of fits budget-wise, in addition to, content-wise, and haven't really settled on anything yet.
Okay.
So we probably will end up self-publishing the thing by the time it's all said and done.
I'm envisioning that sort of that really just British brown, reddish brown leatherette with the gold, line work, designs, and they're just really simple, sort of very unassuming, copy of a Sherlock Holmes,
Right.
that's like looking. I see that on my shelf. So if you guys can make that happen, that's what I want it to look like. Noted. Yeah. So on the social medias, I've got your handle down below, but where is that the best place for people to track you down?
Yeah, I probably these days, Instagram is where I update most.
Okay.
And that's my Instagram handle. I also share everything over to Twitter as well, which is the same handle. So
yeah.
I have a website, but it's far out of date because nobody cares about websites anymore.
It's so crazy, man. It's so crazy. There's a very strange sort of discussion about authors have it a lot because a lot of publishers will be like, hey, we'll create a website for you, and you can have a website with us. But the thing is then the publisher owns your website. They own the content. So the whole, it's this interesting back and forth thing that we have in our digital world where we claim our websites, whatever the thing is, whether it's a company, an individual, whatever the thing is, and we put it out there, and now we have control over this thing. But then someone comes along with some really super trick looking, super easy to do, platform, and then everyone goes running over to that, and they ignore their website / blog, whatever the thing is, and then they do that thing, and they're all busy working on that, and then they grow tired of that because people are horrible on social media to one degree or another. And then they go, well, you know what? I just want to have my own thing. So then they create their own thing, and then they go rushing off to the next social media thing. And now, I think everyone's fleeing their websites right now and all this stuff. And now everyone's on Substack, that's the new thing for the creators. And then I'm sure we're all going to get angry because of something about Substack.
Right.
And because are they going to say, well, now we own this, and then everyone's going to run away and go, so don't get rid of your website. That's my tip.
It's always right there hanging. It's not going anywhere. So
yeah, it's just hard to fold that into one's sort of work life process. What's the workflow? How do you make sure it's there and it's not something that feels like, ugh, I gotta go do that. That's the worst. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, cool. So yeah, go find Andy. So for anybody listening, they'll be in the description, but it's Bennett, Bennet, but switch out the E's for 3's, but they're not 3 E's. It's a little confusing conceptually, but it works. There's 2 N's, 2 T's, 2 E's, and a B.
It's a visual thing. Yeah,
it is. And it's, as I said before, it is totally metal, and I love it. Andy, thanks so much for joining me today. This is it's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Yeah, I don't get to do a whole lot of stuff like this, so this is a treat.
Well, it's been a great talk, and it actually opened my eyes up to a few things in many ways, and a few things about myself, which I'm really happy that's kind of what I do this for, is some sort of talk therapy with the creative mind of myself. I'm like, how do I manage this? How does this person manage that? Because everyone's kind of wrestling the same stuff, and it's how they go about it.
And there certainly is value in sharing with that.
Yeah, totally. So and keep drawing, man, because it's great. And what are we 2-3 months away from October?
From October, yeah, and I still haven't decided what I'm doing yet. So I usually don't decide until mid-September sometime anyway. So.
Oh my gosh. What about a raffle? Could you do a raffle?
Do a poll, do a raffle.
Yeah, do a poll and a raffle, and maybe you could find a way to get a winner and they get a free T-shirt.
Hey.
But that would be cool. I can't wait to see what you produce. Hard to top. Yeah, Muppets, man. Muppets is pretty big. That was
Muppets was fun. I did that for 2 years. I did 2019 and 2021. So I did 62 days of Muppets, and then all the commissions on top of that. So I really more than sort of got that out of my system.
I would think so. I would hope so. I would hope so, unless you get a gig with Henson.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I was talking with a friend about how, that we might continue with something like this, maybe get in touch with the Disney people about doing some prints or something,
Sure.
for the parks or whatever. I know they do a lot of limited edition prints.
They sure do
for their theme parks and such. So that's something I might try and look into at some point. But I never get tired of it. It's great.
They're beautiful. They're beautiful pieces, and I'm sure many other people outside of the Twitter sphere and the comic sphere would be really excited to see that stuff. So maybe do it, man.
I hope so.
Yeah. All right, man. This is great. I really had a great time. Find us somewhere online. You know how that works. Find Andy somewhere. Andy, it was the best time today having a talk with you, my friend. And we'll catch you later, all right?
You bet. Thanks again.
See you.
Bye.